What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another Fantasy Football video. This one, I'm going over 6 players that I think have legitimate league-winning upside and are going undrafted in a lot of leagues. For the purposes of this video, I chose players that are being drafted after pick 150 on Fantasy Pros. So that's composite ADP, obviously, depending on your league size and depending upon how big your team is. A lot of these players could be being drafted, but I tried to sort of dig deeper as well. Before I get into the list of players, I just wanted to give a couple of honorable mentions who didn't quite make the list. One of them would be Devontae Parker for me, who I do think does have a legitimate shot to be the touchdown leader for the Patriots this season. He's a pretty talented wide receiver, and he's got a shot to be the one there. And he's being drafted really late in drafts, and on top of that, I don't really believe Juju's going to be at full health, so I like Devontae Parker this season. One running back that I think is a good name to throw out here as well is going to be Devon Achane. We just heard recently that Jeff Wilson is going to be on IR to start the season. Their head coach came out and said he wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Wilson returned at some point this year. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, so we could be looking at a world where this is a Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane led backfield. And Devon Achane is the young rookie drafted in this third round of the NFL draft with a lot of explosiveness, a lot of pass catching ability, and a guy that could really be a really quality fantasy asset. In one of my deeper leagues, I've already added him off the waiver wire despite my draft having already happened. So I think he's a guy you could look for as well. And then at the quarterback position, I think Sam Howell's a guy I could bring up. He didn't make this video, but I think he's going to be a guy that's legitimately going to run quite a bit, be a guy that, with how talented his receivers are and how good this offensive coordinator is, how good this offensive system is, he could be a guy that surprises people. I think 3,500 to 4,000 yards, 25 passing touchdowns, and a quality rushing floor as well, certainly in the range of outcomes for him. So he's a guy that could be worth drafting later on as well. But yeah, with that, let's just get into the start of the other players that I actually wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. So starting us off, it's going to be a player that I've talked about a lot this offseason. That's going to be Tank Bixby. Tank Bixby is currently being drafted with an ADP of pick 167. That picks him in like a 13th, 14th round kind of area in a 12-team league. That puts him in like a 16th, 17th round area in a 10-team league. So in a lot of leagues and deeper leagues, he's probably getting drafted really late in drafts. I think that's about where he should be being drafted. I'd be willing to take him a little bit earlier than that. He's got a clear path to a workhorse role in this offense. All it takes is one Travis Etienne injury, and he'd be a guy who's getting goal line work, pass catching work, 15 to 20 touches a game, and being a really integral part of what should be an elite offense this season. On top of that, Bixby's going to see significant work at the goal line, regardless of what happens to Travis Etienne, and could legitimately be a guy that sees pass catching volume as well. He's absolutely one of my favorite picks to be making in drafts right now. He's a guy that I fully expect to finish inside the top 30 at the running back position, and honestly, he's being drafted way lower than that. He's currently being drafted as like the wide receiver 45, I want to say, or running back 45. And like I said, the upside's insane for him if something were to happen to Etienne. So if for whatever reason Bixby didn't get drafted in your draft, maybe you're in a 10-team league, so we sort of slid through the cracks, you'll take a look at your waiver wire. There's probably somebody you can drop to grab him. And if you are just still about to draft, I think you should totally be targeting Tank Bixby later on in drafts, just with how much upside he has. And really, he's the perfect guy to stash on your bench and just wait to see what happens. Next player I wanted to bring up here is going to be Kenneth Gainwell. He's currently being drafted 177th overall and has a legitimate shot to lead this Philadelphia Eagles backfield in touches, and that's without an injury, unlike the other running backs that are currently being drafted in this range. Kenneth Gainwell could legitimately be the starting running back for his team without an injury happening to the guys ahead of him. He's a talented running back who profiles to be a really quality pass catcher. He's already performed really well in that area in the past, and he should be part of what's honestly going to be a top 5 offense this season. He's more familiar with this offense than DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. He's been here the last couple of years for Philadelphia, and on top of that, he's got less of an injury history than the two. We all know how often it is that Rashad Penny leaves games with injury and doesn't come back. Same thing with DeAndre Swift. There's going to be a lot of opportunity this season where at least one of those guys is probably going to miss time, and Kenneth Gainwell could see significant work. On top of that, it's pretty clear that Gainwell is going to be given the 2 and 4 minute offense role on this team. It's just because he's more familiar with the system, a guy they trust to really understand what's going on when they're in hurry-up situations, and a guy that they have a lot of confidence in as a franchise. So Gainwell is going to have a meaningful role in this offense. He's also fared fairly well when given goal line opportunities. He's already scored 9 rushing touchdowns in his career. He's got legitimate touchdown upside because of how good this offense is, and I think that gives him legitimate top 20 upside at the running back position, even if an injury doesn't happen. And if the other 2 running backs around him in Swift and Penny do go down, he'd be a featured back on what should be a really good offense. He's honestly got top 10 upside if things really just break right for him across the board. And he's being undrafted in a lot of leagues. He's the perfect guy to stash on your bench and sort of see what happens. You could even sort of figure out what's going on early on in the season. If he's the clear number 3 at the start of the year, you can cut him and move on because then you're just waiting on an injury. But there's a world that comes out where week 1, he's a guy that just gets 10, 15 touches in the offense and is a guy that really is going to be an integral part of this team. So perfect guy to be adding if you've already had your drafts and are just looking to really boost your bench a little bit. And if you haven't had your drafts yet, I think he's a perfect guy to target late in your draft. Next up, we've got a quarterback, and for me, that's going to be Kyler Murray. This one's pretty obvious. He's been a consistent fringe top 5 fantasy quarterback performer when healthy over the first 3 or 4 seasons of his career, and he's going to be looking to prove himself over the back half of the season when he finally returns from injury. I do expect him to miss about 4 to 6 weeks this season and come back to what should be a really struggling Cardinals team. The Cardinals have made it pretty clear with their actions that they are sort of tanking without coming out and saying so, and they're looking to be targeting a guy like Caleb Williams with the #1 overall pick next season, and that means that Kyler Murray really could be just putting on a show to see who wants to come trade for him, where he's going to be landing this time next season. And he's got really competent weapons in this offense. James Conner's a quality running back. Marquise Brown's a really good wide receiver. I like their young tight end and Trey McBride. Michael Wilson's a quality wide receiver who looks great as a rookie so far. Greg Dortch was good in the spurts last year. Rondale Morris showed some flashes. And there's enough on this offense with how bad this defense is going to be that they're going to be in catch-up mode all the time. Kyler Murray should be fully healthy by the time he does return, so I'm not worried about that rushing volume going down for him. So he's going to be the perfect guy that if you want to sort of just wait on quarterback, take a guy like Kirk Cousins or Geno Smith late in your draft, and then wait till the end and stash Kyler Murray on your IR. Especially if you have an IR spot, he's perfect because he's not taking up a bench spot. You can grab Kyler Murray, put him on your IR right after the draft, and then go add someone else that we're talking about here. And if you do that, Kyler Murray is going to be a guy that can really help take your roster over the top as the second half of the season comes on. Next up is another guy that I've talked about quite a bit this offseason, and that's going to be Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims is going to start the season as the clear wide receiver 2 for the Denver Broncos, as it's pretty clear that Jerry Jeudy at this point is not going to be ready for week 1. That means it's going to be Marvin Mims on one side with Courtland Sutton on the other. Only 4 wide receivers for the Denver Broncos even made the 53-man roster. It's those 3 that I've already mentioned, and then Brandon Johnson. So really no target competition as the wide receiver position for Marvin Mims outside of Sutton. He's got elite speed. He can do a lot with the ball in his hands after the catch. He's going to be returning kicks for them as well. He's got they really think can be an explosive playmaker for them. They're going to try and manufacture touches for him. He's also developed a quality rapport with Camp, and so far sounds like he's the kind of guy that Russ is looking for when plays break down. He scrambles outside of the pocket. That really does sort of give me that like Tyler Lockett vibe with Russell Wilson, the kind of guy that just kind of knows where to be. I think Marvin Mims can develop into that. And if Jerry Jeudy's injury drags on, which we're already seeing with Cooper Kupp right now, these hamstring injuries are just really tough to push away. Players try to rush back early, they re-aggravate it, and then it becomes a much more long-term thing. Sort of similar to what we saw with like Keenan Allen last season. And if that happens, I think Marvin Mims has enough talent that he could legitimately be the wide receiver 1 in this offense come the second half of the season. And if this offense takes a step forward that I think we're all expecting it to with under Sean Payton, I personally don't believe Russ is washed. I think he's still going to be a really quality quarterback this season. This should be a good offense. So if Marvin Mims could establish himself as the wide receiver 1 on this team, he'd be a screaming value in drafts right now. He's currently being drafted 225th overall. That's just way too late for this talented of a player who's going to have a clear role early on in the season and could honestly earn more touches going forward if he performs well. Next up, we've got Van Jefferson, coming off of what was a bit of a down year. Obviously, saying a bit of a down year is a little bit understating it, but the Rams had a really disappointing season last season, and I sort of understand why that stink around the team, sort of just bringing down every single player on this roster in terms of where they're being drafted in fantasy, but he's coming off the board as the 249th player right now, and that's just way too low. Jefferson is the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense behind Cooper Kupp, and this offense should be relatively decent as long as Matthew Stafford is healthy. Obviously, that's a relatively big if, given what we saw from Stafford last year, along with his age and how this offensive line is a pretty big question mark. But with Cooper Kupp injured as well, Jefferson's profiling to be the #1 wide receiver in this offense for what could be up to like the first month of the season. We don't know the full extent of Cooper Kupp's re-aggravation of his hamstring injury, but there is a world that exists where we see Cooper Kupp miss 4 or 6 weeks. Who knows? He's an old player with an injury history. These hamstring injuries, like I said, they're tough to shake, and I think we could see a world where Cooper Kupp does miss several weeks this season, and Van Jefferson's going to have a clear role in that situation. He's a deep threat. He's going to have some explosive plays as well. And 2 years ago, Van Jefferson finished as the wide receiver 41. He had about 800 receiving yards that season. That's really decent for where he's being drafted. And even last year, he was the wide receiver 72. 2 years ago, when he finished as a wide receiver 41, he was the number 3 in that offense. They had Odell and Robert Woods at times, so he was never really the true number 2 in the offense. That means that 41 is honestly probably too low for him, assuming you want to bet on the health of Matthew Stafford over the course of the whole season. And he's being drafted as the wide receiver 80 right now. That's just ridiculously low. He's a guy that's got legitimate flex upside, and honestly could have some like boom or bust weeks as well. Could have a really nice couple performances if things go right for him, and be drafted where he is. Even in the deepest of leagues, he's being undrafted pretty often, and he's a guy that I'd love to have on my bench and would be comfortable playing as a flex a few times this season. And the last player I want to talk about here is going to be Jonathan Mingo. Mingo is really the only wide receiver to me that has the legitimate upside to be a meaningful fantasy contributor in fantasy this year out of Carolina. He was drafted in the second round by Carolina at like pick 39 overall. That makes him like honestly in a very similar tier to those first 4 wide receivers drafted. I know a lot of people give the Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, JSN guys, a lot more hype than a guy that goes in the second round. But he was only picked about 15 spots behind these guys, and he's a really talented receiver. I've liked his tapes that I've seen so far, and I think he's a good enough player to be a meaningful contributor pretty early on in the season, especially with the injury to DJ Chark. We don't know if Chark's going to be able to suit up week 1, but Mingo's got a legitimate shot. He's going to be starting in 3 wide receiver sets to start the season, and he should grow as a player and just improve his ability to perform on the field along with Bryce Young as they both get better over the course of the season. I think they're going to develop a pretty quality rapport, be guys that are sort of just going to be sort of linked in their careers because they're going to get to develop together as professionals. And Adam Thielen is likely going to start the season as the #1 target, but he's 32 years old at this point. He's going to turn 33 at some point this year. He just wasn't that good last year either. I don't see a world where Adam Thielen can really be a true difference maker for you guys, but Mingo's got the athleticism. He's got the ability to really be a meaningful contributor, and over the second half of the season, I think he could be the guy that really sort of breaks out and be a real difference maker for you guys. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 65 at pick 185. He could end up being a real steal. I didn't mean to sort of throw my YouTube handle in there, but that was kind of funny. Maybe I'll play around with that a little bit more. But that being said, I think Mingo could be a legitimate value where he's being drafted. He's a guy that I do think is going to have some spike weeks. It's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, but if things develop for him over the second half of the season, he could be a legitimate contributor for you guys and the guy that's probably on waiver wires in your league right now. So that'll do it for my undrafted players with league-winning upside video. If there are any players that I didn't touch on that you think are going undrafted and have legitimate potential to be league-winning assets, guys with a lot more upside than where they're being drafted, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say there. If you guys disagree with any of my players, feel free to let me know. I'd love to sort of go back and forth on that. Up next, I'll be doing another mock draft. I think it'll be a 10-team PPR video. I've got another draft coming up Sunday night, so I want to just sort of, do a mock draft there, and I'll record that for you guys and sort of get you that out. On Monday, I'll be getting you guys another video, and then Monday night, I'll be doing my first ever live stream where I'll be live streaming the listener or the subscriber league draft. So feel free to stay tuned for that. That draft's going to be at 6 p.m. Pacific time, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you're there. It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be the first ever live stream. You can sort of interact with you guys, do a Q&A, answer all of your guys' questions while I draft that team, and that should be a lot of fun. So really looking forward to that. If you want to make sure that you're up to date getting all these videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it if you would. We're at about 780 subscribers right now, so we're not quite at that goal of 1,000 by the start of the NFL season. Let's see if we can make a big push in this next week or so. Probably be really tough to hit 1,000, but I'd love to get as close as we can. Been super fun watching the channel grow, and I really do appreciate all the support. It means a lot seeing how much you guys are really enjoying the content and all that. So if you've already subscribed to the channel as well, please do just give the video a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and helps me know that you guys want to get more content like this. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.